I flatlined for 30 minutes. I know how that sounds. Believe me, part of me still doesn't believe it. But it happened. I was gone. No heartbeat, no breath, just a long, flat line on a monitor in the same hospital where I worked as a nurse. And what I saw in those 30 minutes, what I was shown on the other side, it will change everything you think you know about life, and especially about pain. The truth is, the pandemic wasn't what we thought it was. Not even close. Before I was the woman who died and came back, I was just a nurse. My life was measured in 12-hour shifts and the steady beep of heart monitors. I wore my scrubs like armor, and my competence was a shield. At the hospital, I was in control. I knew the procedures, I knew the medicines. I could look at a patient and see a problem to be solved, a chart to be updated, a life to be stabilized. I was good at it. Really good. But that control vanished the second I clocked out. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I'd come home to the smell of nothing, eat a meal I barely tasted, and scroll through other people's perfect-looking lives on my phone. I was surrounded by people all day, but I was profoundly alone. My connections were as sterile as the hospital hallways. I had colleagues, not friends. I'd call my mom on Sundays, and we'd talk about the weather. It was a life that looked fine on paper, but inside, there was this hollow echo, a deep, gnawing emptiness. I saw pain every single day. To me, it was just a symptom, a biological response to injury or illness, something to be managed with morphine, to be numbed until it went away. I thought I understood death too. It was the enemy, the final failure, the flat line on the screen that meant we had lost. I never once thought it could be anything else. I definitely didn't think it could be a doorway. I remember one night, standing in my kitchen, looking at my own reflection in the dark window. I saw a stranger with tired eyes. I was saving lives, but I wasn't really living my own. I was just existing, a ghost in a blue uniform. I felt this desperate need for something more, for a meaning I couldn't find in a textbook or a patient's file. I just didn't know what it was. I thought that feeling, that deep, silent ache, was the worst kind of suffering. But what happened next was so much worse, and so much better, because that's when the world started to get sick. It started like a whisper, a rumor on the news, a memo in our inboxes. Then the whisper became a roar. The first wave hit our hospital like a tsunami, and we were all just swept away by it. The familiar sterile scent of antiseptic was replaced by something else, the smell of fear. It was thick in the air, you could almost taste it. We were running out of beds, then ventilators, then just running out of time. My life became a blur of blue scrubs and fogged-up face shields. My own face was a roadmap of pressure sores from my mask. I was running on caffeine and pure adrenaline, but there was one patient I can't forget, an old man named Arthur. While everyone else was panicked, fighting for every breath, he was calm. He had these pale blue eyes that seemed to look right through me, not at the nurse, but at me. One night, I was adjusting his oxygen, and he grabbed my wrist. His hand was frail, but his grip was surprisingly strong. He looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, his voice raspy, "Don't be afraid of the silence, little bird. It's where the real music is." I just smiled, one of those reassuring nurse smiles, and told him to get some rest. But his words, they stuck to me. What silence? What music? I didn't know it then, but he was giving me a message, a warning. That's when I started feeling it. At first, it was just a tickle in my throat. I'd clear my throat, take a sip of water, and blame it on the dry, recycled air of the hospital. Then came the exhaustion. It was a deep, bone-crushing weariness that no amount of sleep could fix. I'd stand up too fast, and the whole world would tilt, the bright hospital lights smearing into streaks. I told myself it was just stress, burnout. We were all feeling it. I was a professional at ignoring my own pain while I treated everyone else's. But what happened next was something I couldn't ignore. I had a dream. It was so real, I woke up with my heart pounding against my ribs, drenched in sweat. I was floating in a dark, quiet space. There was no sound, no light, just peace. And then, I heard a sound, a long, single, high-pitched tone. The sound I'd heard 100 times at work. The sound of a flatline. But in the dream, I knew it was mine. I woke up gasping, the phantom sound still ringing in my ears. The next day at work, I felt a chill I couldn't shake. I was in the break room, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold my coffee cup. I saw my reflection in the microwave door, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were hollow, her skin was pale and waxy. That's when the cough came back, but this time it was different. It was a deep, dry, body-racking cough that stole my breath. My colleagues looked at me with concern in their eyes. I waved them off, saying I was fine. But I knew I wasn't. I knew what was coming. It was like standing on a train track, seeing the light in the distance getting brighter and brighter, and knowing you can't move. That night, after my shift, I didn't even make it to my couch. I collapsed on the floor of my apartment, my keys still in my hand. My body was on fire, but I was shivering. Every breath felt like I was inhaling glass. I was a nurse. I knew the signs. I knew exactly what was happening to me. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, the old man's words came back to me. Don't be afraid of the silence. Was this what he meant? Is this how it was all supposed to end? My cheek was pressed against the cold laminate of my own floor. It was a strange detail to notice, the cheap wood grain pattern so close to my eye. My body felt like it was plugged into an outlet, a high-voltage current of fever and chills shaking me apart. Each breath was a debt I couldn't repay. My lungs, the two organs I had trusted my entire life, were betraying me. They felt like they were filling with cement. The nurse in my head was screaming. Acute respiratory distress, sepsis, hypoxia. I was ticking off the boxes of my own death certificate. I could almost hear the frantic beeping of a monitor that wasn't there. I thought about the irony of it all. I had held the hands of dozens of people as they took this same journey, whispering reassurances I didn't know if I believed. Now there was no one to hold my hand. My apartment was as silent as a tomb. And then, something inside me just let go. The fight drained out of me, leaving a strange, quiet calm in its place. I stopped trying to draw in another agonizing breath. I stopped fighting the tremors. I remembered Arthur, the old man with the pale blue eyes. Don't be afraid of the silence, little bird. It's where the real music is. For the first time, his words made a terrifying kind of sense. Maybe this was it. The silence. The end of the noise, the pain, the shifts, the hollow loneliness. My life didn't flash before my eyes. Not like in the movies. Instead, I saw a single clear image. It was me, a little girl, sitting on a swing, pumping my legs so hard, trying to fly high enough to touch the clouds. I was so full of hope. Where did she go? In that final moment, my last thought wasn't of love or regret. It was a simple, heartbreaking question that I whispered to the empty room. Did I even matter? The world began to shrink. The edges of my vision turned dark, tunneling into a single point of light, the cheap fluorescent fixture on my kitchen ceiling. The sounds of my own gasping faded, replaced by a low hum, like the whole world was holding its breath. The fire in my lungs went out. The pain was just gone. It was like someone had flipped a switch. And then I heard it, not with my ears, but with my soul. A single, pure, high-pitched tone that vibrated through my entire being. The long, unwavering sound of a flatline. My flatline. But it wasn't the sound of an ending. It felt like a beginning. It was the music Arthur had promised. The silence was finally here, and I was no longer in my body. I was free. It wasn't like floating. It was more like becoming. One moment, I was a broken thing on a cold floor. The next, I was just everywhere. There was no pop, no tunnel of light like you see in the movies. It was simpler, a release. Like I'd been holding my breath my entire life, and I had finally let it go. I was still in my apartment, but it was different. I could see myself down there, a pale, still figure in blue scrubs, looking small and fragile. It was a strange sight, like looking at a photograph of a stranger you vaguely recognize. There was no panic, no horror, just a quiet, detached curiosity. The nurse in me noted the bluish tint to her lips. Cyanosis. The rest of me just watched. I tried to reach out, to touch my own shoulder, but there was nothing to reach with. I was just awareness, a thought without a body. And then the room started to change. The walls of my apartment, the ones I'd painted a boring shade of beige to feel more adult, they didn't fall away. They just became irrelevant. They shimmered, like a heat haze on a summer road, and then I could see through them. I saw my neighbor in 4B watching TV. I saw a family 2 floors down having dinner. I saw all the little lives playing out in my building, all these tiny, separate worlds. But from here, they looked connected, like little islands that were all part of the same continent, just under the surface of the water. But what happened next was when the real shift began. The scene of my apartment, my building, my city, it all started to fade. Not into blackness, but into light. A soft, warm, golden light that felt more real than anything I'd ever touched. It wasn't blinding. It was welcoming. It felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. Every fear I'd ever had, every ounce of loneliness, every bit of the deep, gnawing ache I carried, it was just dissolved, burned away by this incredible, unconditional love that was pouring into me from every direction. It was a feeling, not a thought. You are safe. You are known. You are loved. This was the silence Arthur had talked about. But it wasn't empty. It was full. It was humming with a kind of music that you feel instead of hear. A vibration that resonated in the very core of what I now was. There was no time here. No up or down. Just this beautiful, peaceful, loving existence. I thought this is it. This is heaven. But I was wrong. This wasn't the destination. It was just the doorway. Because that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Something was with me in the light. It wasn't a person, not a figure with wings or a white robe. It was a presence. A consciousness so vast, so powerful, and so intelligent that my human mind couldn't even begin to comprehend it. It was like a single drop of water trying to understand the entire ocean. And yet, I wasn't afraid. Because the love I was feeling, it was coming from this presence. It knew me. It knew my name. It knew the little girl on the swing. And it knew the answer to the last question I ever asked. Did I even matter? And without a single word being spoken, it began to show me the answer. Have you ever had a moment where you felt completely and utterly at peace, even in the middle of chaos? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you want to hear what this presence showed me, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss what comes next. The presence didn't speak in words. Words felt clumsy and small here. The communication was like a download, a flood of pure knowing that poured directly into the core of my being. It started with my question, the one I'd whispered on my apartment floor. Did I even matter? Instantly, I was shown my life, but not like a movie reel. It was more like I was standing in the center of a vast, three-dimensional tapestry, and every thread was a moment, a choice, a person I had touched. I saw myself, a clumsy new nurse, spilling a cup of water on a patient. I had been so embarrassed. But then I saw the patient, an elderly woman, smile a genuine, deep smile for the first time in days, because the small human mistake made her feel less alone. I saw the ripple of that moment, how she was a little kinder to her son on the phone later that day, and how he, in turn, was more patient with his own daughter. I saw the hundreds of hands I had held. I hadn't just been feeling for a pulse. I had been a conduit, a connection, a silent promise that they weren't alone in their final moments. I saw all the small, forgotten acts of my life, a reassuring smile to a scared family member in a hallway, a joke shared with a tired colleague in the break room, the time I stayed late just to brush an unconscious patient's hair. In my life, these were just things I did. Here, I saw them for what they were. Threads of light, weaving into the lives of others, strengthening the fabric of the whole world in ways I could never have imagined. The answer to my question wasn't a yes or no. It was an overwhelming, soul-shaking feeling that washed over me. Everything matters. Every single breath matters. But what happened next was when my own small story dissolved into a much, much larger one. The view pulled back. I was no longer seeing my own life. I was seeing everything, all of humanity. It looked like a galaxy of billions of beautiful, shimmering points of light, each one a soul. But they were distant from each other, each flickering in its own isolated space, the connections between them faint and thin. I could feel the collective loneliness, the quiet desperation, the low hum of fear and competition that had become the background noise of the world. And then I saw the pandemic. It didn't look like a virus. It was a great, dark wave that swept through the galaxy of souls. My human mind screamed destruction, death, pain. But the presence held me in its perfect peace and showed me what was really happening. As the wave of suffering washed over the lights, something incredible occurred. The isolated points of light began to move. They started reaching for each other. The faint lines of connection between them began to glow, brighter and brighter, until the entire galaxy was a brilliant, interconnected web of light. That's when the great revelation hit me, a truth so profound it rearranged my entire soul. The voice that wasn't a voice explained. The pain was necessary. It was the only medicine strong enough to break the walls you built around your hearts. The isolation you feared forced you to truly seek connection. The fear you ran from forced you to find your faith. The suffering was a rescue, not a punishment. I saw it all then. Neighbors leaving groceries on doorsteps for strangers. Families on video calls, finally saying the things they'd left unsaid for years. People standing on balconies to cheer for people they'd never met. The pain was a fire, but it wasn't burning the world down. It was burning away the illusions that kept everyone apart. It was a forced awakening. A violent, messy, and heartbreakingly beautiful reminder that the only thing that was ever real was love. The pandemic wasn't the tragedy. The real tragedy was the disconnected world that came before it. I wanted to stay there forever, to bathe in that light, to exist in that perfect, loving truth. Who would ever want to leave heaven? But there was a boundary. Not a wall or a gate, but a simple understanding. My tapestry wasn't finished yet. And then a final, clear message was placed in my heart. A mission that was both a command and a choice. Go back. Go back and tell them what you have seen. Tell them not to be afraid of the pain. It is how they will remember how to love. Have you ever found an unexpected blessing in the middle of a painful time? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. And if you want to know what happened when I came back, how I woke up in that hospital bed after being gone for 30 minutes, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell. The story of what comes next is just as unbelievable as what I left behind. The love in that place, it was gravity. It held me. It was the only thing that had ever felt truly real, and the thought of leaving it was an agony my soul had never known. Why would anyone choose to go back? Back to the pain, the loneliness, the bone-deep weariness of being human. Back to a body that had failed me. I wanted to stay. I wanted to dissolve into that light forever. It was the only home I had ever truly found, but it was like standing at the edge of an ocean. I could feel its infinite depth, its perfect peace, but I knew I couldn't just step in. Not yet. The presence gently showed me my tapestry, the one I had seen before. But this time, I saw the threads that were not yet woven. I saw a future, a purpose, a reason that was bigger than my own comfort. And then the final message came, not as a command, but as a choice offered from a place of infinite love. Go back. Your story is not the end. It is the beginning of theirs. Go back and tell them not to be afraid. The choice was mine. I could stay in this perfect peace, or I could return to the fire and carry a single drop of this living water back with me. And in that moment, thinking of all those other flickering lights, all those other souls lost in the dark, I knew what I had to do. The little girl on the swing, the one who wanted to touch the clouds, she wouldn't hide. She would fly. I gave my consent, not with words, but with my entire being. Yes, the return was nothing like the gentle release of death. It was violent. It was like the entire universe was being forced back into a tiny broken box. The golden light didn't fade. It was ripped away from me. I felt myself being pulled backward at an impossible speed, the beautiful music of the silence turning into a deafening roar. It felt like being squeezed through a pinhole, all that expansive awareness being compressed back into the narrow confines of a skull. And then came the pain. It hit me like a physical blow. The feeling of my lungs, raw and on fire. The cold, heavy weight of my own limbs. The frantic, hammering beat of a heart that had been silent just moments before. It was a brutal, shocking agony. My first breath wasn't a gasp of life. It was a scream of protest, a raw, ragged sound that tore through my throat. My eyes snapped open. The world was a blur of harsh white light and smeared shapes. The first thing I registered was the sound. A steady, rhythmic beeping. A sound I knew better than my own name. A heartbeat. My heartbeat. I saw a face hovering over me. A familiar one. Dr. Evans, his surgical mask hanging from one ear, his eyes wide. And there were tears streaming down his face, dropping onto my blanket. His voice was choked, a broken whisper that cut through the fog in my head. "She's back. I don't believe it. She's back. We lost her for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes I had spent in eternity. And I was back. I had a story to tell. But what do you do when you come back from the dead with a message that no one is ready to hear? How do you explain the unexplainable? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my position. And if you want to hear about the struggle that came next, about trying to live in this world after seeing the next, make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications. You won't believe the stories I have to share. Waking up was like being born, but without any of the gentleness. It was a violent crash back into a body that felt like a cage. The first thing I felt was the tube down my throat, a hard plastic violation that made me gag. The pain was a symphony, and every part of my body was an instrument. My lungs were on fire, my head throbbed, my muscles screamed from the memory of convulsions I hadn't even been present for. For a few seconds, I was just an animal, thrashing in a trap. Then I saw Dr. Evans' face, his eyes red-rimmed and wide with something that looked like terror and awe. He was saying my name over and over. And behind him, I saw the monitor, that beautiful, steady green line, rising and falling in time with the beeping. My pulse. My life. A prison sentence. All I wanted was to go back. Back to the light. Back to the love. I started to cry, but the tube in my throat turned the sobs into silent, jerky shudders. They called it a miracle, a medical anomaly. The doctors and nurses, my own colleagues, would come into my room and just stare at me. They'd talk in hushed tones outside my door, using words like unexplained neurological recovery and spontaneous circulation. They were trying to fit what happened to me into a textbook, to find a neat scientific box for it. But I knew the truth. They were looking at the box, and I had seen the entire universe outside of it. How could I ever explain that to them? The hardest part was the phone call with my mom. She cried, of course, a flood of relieved, happy tears. She kept saying, "Oh, my baby, I thought I lost you. It's a miracle." And I just held the phone, the cold plastic pressed to my ear, and said, "I'm okay, Mom." What else could I say? Mom, I died, and it was the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me. I saw why the world is in pain, and it's actually for our own good. I didn't want to come back. She would have thought I'd lost my mind. So I just listened to her cry, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my entire life. I was surrounded by people who loved me, and I had never been more of a stranger. But what happened next was the first sign that I hadn't come back alone. The world looked different, not just emotionally, but physically. The colors seemed duller, like the whole world was a faded photograph compared to the vibrancy of the light I'd been in. Food tasted like ash in my mouth. The chatter of the television in the hospital room was just noise, a meaningless distraction from the deep, quiet truth I now carried inside me. It was like I had been listening to the most beautiful orchestra in the universe, and now I was stuck in a room with a broken radio playing static. Then came the first real shock. A young nurse, one I barely knew, came in to check my vitals. She was smiling, making small talk, but I could see it. It wasn't with my eyes. It was with something else, a new sense I didn't have a name for. I could see the grief clinging to her like a shadow. It was a deep, purple-gray color, a heavy cloak around her shoulders. I could feel the shape of her loss. A father, taken by the same sickness that had taken me. While she was taking my blood pressure, I looked at her and said quietly, "I'm so sorry about your dad. He knows how much you love him." Her hand froze on the cuff. The professional smile dropped from her face, and her eyes filled with tears. Her voice was a tiny whisper. How did you know?" I didn't have an answer. I just knew. The presence had shown me that we were all connected, and now it was like I could see the threads. I could see the light and the dark that everyone carried. I had come back with a piece of the other side still clinging to me, and I was terrified. Have you ever had an intuition about someone that turned out to be true, something you couldn't possibly have known? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you want to find out how I learned to live with this strange new ability and what happened when I tried to share my message with the world, make sure you subscribe and click that bell. The story only gets more unbelievable from here. That new sense, it wasn't a gift. At first, it felt like a curse. It was like my brain had a new software update I didn't ask for, one that stripped away all the polite filters people wear. I couldn't unsee it. I'd walk down the street and see a man in a business suit, but I'd also see the jagged gray cloud of anxiety hanging over him about losing his job. I'd see a smiling cashier at the grocery store and feel the deep, aching blue of her loneliness. It was a constant, overwhelming flood of raw human pain, and I was drowning in it. For weeks, I barely left my apartment. I had come back from the dead only to be buried alive by the suffering of the living. The old me, the nurse, would have tried to fix it, to diagnose it, medicate it, manage it. But this was different. This wasn't a symptom on a chart. It was the soul itself. And I realized the message from the other side wasn't just about understanding pain, it was about learning how to stand in its presence without being destroyed by it. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I forced myself to go to a park. I just wanted to feel the sun on my face. I sat on a bench and saw a little girl, maybe 5 years old, fall off her scooter and scrape her knee. She started to wail, that full-bodied world-is-ending cry that only little kids can do. Her father rushed over, but he didn't just check her knee. He knelt down, looked her right in the eyes, and his entire being radiated a calm golden light of pure love and safety. He didn't say, "Don't cry," or, "You're fine." He just said, "Wow, that really hurt, didn't it? Let's take a deep breath together." And as I watched, I saw his golden light touch the sharp red energy of her pain. And it didn't erase it, but it softened it. It held it. And that's when I finally understood. My mission wasn't to take away the pain. It was to remind people of the love that could hold it. That night, I called my mom. For the first time, I didn't talk about the weather. I just listened. I could feel the soft, lavender-colored worry she always carried for me, the faint silver threads of her own quiet regrets. But I could also see the fierce, brilliant sun of her love. At the end of the call, I didn't just say, "I love you." I said, "Mom, thank you for being my mom. You did a great job." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, and then I heard her take a shaky breath. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "I love you so much." For the first time in my life, I felt like I was talking to the real person, not just the role she played. I was finally seeing the music, not just the silence. My life changed completely after that. I quit my job at the hospital. How could I go back to treating symptoms when I had seen the cause? The cause was a world starving for real connection. I sold most of my things. The empty apartment I once hated became a space of peace. I didn't need to fill it with stuff anymore. It was already full. I started spending my days just being with people, listening to them, truly seeing them. And I started writing everything down, every detail of what I saw on the other side. And that's how I ended up here, talking to you. I realized I couldn't just tell my friends or my family. The message wasn't just for them, it was for everyone who felt that hollow echo. Everyone who ever looked in the mirror and asked, "Did I even matter?" I had been given the answer, and it wasn't mine to keep. This camera, this screen, it's my way of kneeling down, looking you in the eyes, and reminding you of the light you carry inside you. The pain you feel is real, but the love that can hold it is even realer. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed the direction of your life? I want to hear all about it in the comments. And if these stories resonate with you, if you feel that there's more to this life than what we can see, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. I have so many more stories to share about the connections that bind us all together. So, I'm not the same person who collapsed on that apartment floor. That nurse, she was so focused on fixing things, on stopping the bleeding and silencing the alarms. She saw pain as the enemy. But I know now, the real enemy isn't the pain. It's the disconnection. It's the illusion that we are all separate, that we are in this alone. The greatest tragedy isn't dying. It's going through your whole life without ever truly connecting, without ever truly loving. That experience didn't just save my life, it gave me one. It taught me that our purpose isn't to build a life where we never get hurt. That's impossible. Our purpose is to learn how to love so deeply that the love becomes bigger than the pain. It's to hold each other through the darkness, not just wait for the light. The pandemic wasn't the sickness. It was the medicine for a world that had forgotten how to feel. I came back with a story that says your pain has a purpose. Your life, every single moment of it, matters more than you can ever imagine. You are a thread in a tapestry so vast and so beautiful, and your light is needed. That's the truth I was sent back to share. That's why I'm here, talking to you now. Did you feel it too? In the middle of all that chaos and fear, did you see love show up in ways you never expected? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if this message found a place in your heart, please subscribe and turn on all notifications. Someone you know might need to be reminded that even in the darkest of times, they are not alone. And I have so many more stories to share.